You are awesome, and I'm glad you stopped by Midwest Sports Net today. Welcome to college football this week. We have a full slate of games for week 2 in the NAIA football season for 2025. We're going to get to 40-plus games, around 45 tonight. But first, we're going to look at the first rankings to come out for the 2025 season beyond the preseason rankings. Now, these are the media rankings that are put on by NAIA Football. Corey and Matt and the guys there at NAIA Football take care of that from the media perspective. Let's take a look at it really quickly before we get into this week's games. Texas Wesleyan, tough loss at Lindsey Wilson, falls pretty far in the media poll, down to number 25. Concordia, Southeastern, Dickinson State, Mid-American Nazarene was there for that game last week. That was absolutely wonderful. We'll be on site at a couple of places that we'll talk about later in the show today. Evangel into the top 20, and Montana Western falling out of the top 10 after the loss to a very tough Montana Tech team last week. And then looking at the top 10, scrolling over there, no surprise, Grandview's at the top. Benedictine is number 2, and that makes for a very big matchup this week. We'll talk about that early on. I invite you to go ahead and join the chat, if you will. Let us know not only who you're cheering for, but tonight, let us know why your team is going to win. Jeff chiming in, Roll Stangs. Jeff, why are the Stangs going to win this week? Let us know. I have a good idea. It could have something to do with that offensive line. Also stopping by tonight, Dave. Same Roll Stangs. Let us know why your team is going to win tonight, and I promise you we will get to that team a little bit later on. Grandview, Benedictine, Kaiser up to number 3 in the media poll. Kaiser, the Seahawks were at number 6 last week, and speaking of number 6, Friends up to number 6 in the top 10 in the media poll after just a blistering day of running the ball on Saturday for Friends. So that's a look at, well, all of the top 25 there according to the media. NAIF Ball, again, shout out to Corey Thorpe and to Matt Schwartzler and the folks at NAIF Ball for providing us with a media poll each week. And yes, I do get a chance to vote in that too, but it's not about me any at all. I'm appreciative to those guys for putting that on. So let's go back and let's take a look now at week number 2 in the NAIA. And again, I invite you in. Come be a part of the chat, be a part of the community here on Midwest Sports Net. All right, one Thursday night game that is coming up in a couple of days, September 4th, and it's Valley City State going on the road at Augsburg. D3 Augsburg, 5th meeting between the two, and the series is tied at 2 games apiece. Valley City State won last year 24-14. Joey Cave, the starting quarterback, was named last week, and he was 19 for 32, 229 yards passing, and 1 touchdown last week. Threw a couple picks as well. Carried the ball for nearly 60 yards. We'll see if the Vikings can turn the tables as the season 0-1 for Valley City State to get started. Let's go ahead and move on into Saturday's games. 44 of them, and that's my number. I like that number. So 44 of them. Benedictine, number 2 in the country, 1-0. Grandview, number 1 in the country, first game of the season. As a matter of fact, this is going to be the second consecutive game for the Grandview Vikings in which it is a 1-2 matchup. Number 1 versus number 2. It was Grandview and Kaiser last year in the national championship game. Of course, Grandview came away with the victory and maintained the undefeated season to win the national championship in the NAIA Football Championship Series. Early on, season opener against a Hart Conference opponent, a conference in which Grandview has not lost in literal years. We'll find out. Benedictine starts the season 1-0 after a big-time win over Morningside last Saturday, 38-34. For Grandview, this is the 10th meeting between the Vikings and the Ravens. Grandview's won 7 of those previous 9 meetings, including a 52-28 win in 2024, and the Vikings have won 5 straight. Benedictine and Grandview each bring a Jackson to the table. Well, Grandview actually brings a couple, but in the quarterback position, we'll go with that. Jackson Dooley last week against Morningside, 20 of 37, 280 yards passing, 3 touchdown passes, and really probably the most important stat of the day. And I know that Jeff and Dave watching this right now, they don't like the stat as much, but Dooley had no picks on the day. Turnovers were big in that contest on Saturday, and Benedictine comes away with the win. Dooley had 8 carries, Didn't get any positive yardage, at least overall, but did score one rushing touchdown to go with that. So Dooley with 4 touchdowns accounted for in the game. Jackson Waring, well, he's just the defending NAIA Player of the Year as well as the national champion quarterback. 2,514 passing yards last year, 25 touchdown passes, 910 rushing yards last year. That's right. He was nearly 1,000-yard running back or rusher last year, if you will. 13 touchdowns on the ground as well. So Waring, in his last season worth of stats, 38 touchdowns accounted for. This should be a big-time matchup, and it's going to be in Des Moines. So keep an eye on this one. This is you have to say the big game of the weekend, and we're going to look at all the games on the schedule. And I like to talk about each one of them because everyone's team is important. This game is, it's 1 versus 2. So you have to throw that one out there. All right, Kentucky Christian started the season with a 58-0 victory over South Carolina Central Christian last week. They're on the road to take on Division III Brevard College. Second meeting, as a matter of fact, Brevard won last year by 16, 41-25. And that means Kentucky Christian's playing Brevard College twice in 3 games. Brevard College is playing Kentucky Christian in back-to-back games. They haven't had a game yet this year. Kentucky Christian 1-0 to start the season. Jackson, another Jackson at quarterback. That has to be the QB name of the year. Jackson Wasick, one of 4 players to take snaps for the Knights on Saturday last week. He was 15 of 18 passing, 83% completion percentage there, 215 yards, 5 touchdown passes thrown. And granted, Kentucky Christian, the dominant team in this one. It was a favorable matchup against a USCAA squad in South Carolina Central Christian, but Wasick didn't throw any interceptions either. So 5 touchdowns thrown in that one. Let's see if he will go ahead and continue this along against a Division III opponent on Saturday. Campbellsville with a win last week, a big win over St. Francis. Weber International also with a big win last week. It's the 7th meeting between these 2 programs. Weber International leads the series 4-2 all time, but Campbellsville won 28-10 in 2024. Will Campbellsville start Jet Engel again? It is a possibility as, at Midwest Sportsnet, we don't know as much about the injury to Jagger Gillis, so we'll see if he comes back for this one. Last week on the website, it did list Jet Engel as the starter for week 1, so it's a Tuesday show tonight. We'll go to Thursday shows next week with the weekly preview, so maybe we'll know a little bit more. In the meantime, Jet Engel took care of business last week, a starting quarterback last year for Kentucky Christian, so just moves over, and he's continuing to start for Campbellsville. For Weber International, you have to know that the offense was outgained last week. This was a defensive performance last week that was able to pull off the win against the Division I opponent in Stetson. Outgained was Weber International, 403-190. Rushing yards, outgained, 4-1 almost, 282-72. So we'll see if the Warriors can put some offense into motion and make something happen. Thomas at Union Commonwealth. Both teams picked up losses last week as this is the first meeting between these 2 schools. Thomas lost to Bluefield. Union Commonwealth lost to Cumberland's last week. And Thomas, it's Cecil Crawford, who stepped out as one of the key performers, 17 carries for 87 yards and a touchdown. They also have Orion Walker as the starting quarterback, and I mention that because we've talked about Jackson's at starting quarterback. How about Orion? That's just a really cool name. Anyway, Union Commonwealth, Taji Jackson, the running back, also key to the Bulldogs' output last week, 17 carries, 67 rushing yards. It'll be Thomas at Union Commonwealth again for the first time for those 2. Siena Heights in its swan song, and the season gets underway on Saturday. First game of the season taking on St. Francis of Indiana, who already has a loss in that column. Unfortunately for the Cougars, St. Francis fell last week to Campbellsville. It'll be the 13th and final meeting between these 2. St. Francis owns an 8-4 lead all time in the series and won by 22 last year, 32-10, won the last 2. Siena Heights, Matt Cohn preparing for his final season at the helm with the Saints. For St. Francis, Joshua Kolka, last week, 389 passing yards, and that is good enough for second in the NAIA right now. Adam Smith also with a great day, caught the ball and brought in 173 of those receiving yards. That's good enough for 5th in the NAIA. So the Cougars making a little bit of noise on the offensive side of the ball right off the bat. Staying with the mid-states, as we have Taylor, who picked up a loss in overtime last week, taking on St. Francis of Illinois. The Fighting Saints playing in the first game of the season, 9th meeting between these two. Taylor owns a 5-3 all-time advantage, but St. Francis of Illinois won 24-7, not last year, but in 2023. The matchup then, of course, Taylor with the overtime loss last week to Olivet Nazarene. Taylor brings out Nathan Parker, 16 carries for 90 yards, had 1 rushing touchdown, but also another back with 16 carries last week in Kyle Turanchek. 16 carries. He had just 34 yards, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns. They were able to give him the ball for more short yardage use. So Parker, Turanchek, both in the backfield, combined for 32 carries. You know it's going to be a ground game. Coach Mingo had a strong rushing offense last year, and it helped the Trojans to a 9-2 record overall. You got to think that that's what they're looking at again right now. According to sports information from St. Francis, Coach Curry hasn't yet named his starter for the season opener for the Fighting Saints. Judson, 0-1, taking on Defiance, getting the win last week at Rio Grande. Second meeting between these two. Defiance won last year 38-20 over the Eagles. Eagles lost at Mayville State last week 49-20. And the new look for the Comets, that was just a tough offense for Judson to try to defend, even in week 1. Defiance with a 48-6 victory over Rio Grande. Judson had Grant Alexander Jr. with 157 receiving yards. That's good enough for 6th in the NAI and a couple of receiving touchdowns. He was thrown the ball by Marcus Freeman, 16 for 30, passing 193 yards. So better than 75% of the receiving yards went to Alexander. He had 1 passing touchdown. For Defiance, it was the first season opening win since 2009. Jelani Warren led the way, 11 of 17 passing, 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, threw a couple of picks as well. Also had 10 carries for 36 yards and a pair of rushing touchdowns too, so accounted for 4 of those on the day for Defiance College. Let's see if they can keep the offense going with their first home game of the season, taking on again Judson. St. Mary, we go to the KCAC, lost last week. Ottawa lost last week, so each team trying to pick up the first win of the season. The Braves are 20-5 all-time in this series, won 33-30 last year, and Ottawa is St. Mary's most often played opponent, well, along with Sterling and Tabor, too. You got a lot of activity there in the KCAC. It's similar to some of the matchups to the Frontier Conference. Of course, Frontier Conference matchups, I mean, you've got teams playing each other into the hundreds of times, and we'll even, I think, talk about one of those today. Ottawa brings out Luke Edward, the sophomore quarterback from Overbrook, Kansas. Last week, 19 of 32 passing for 141 yards and had 1 passing touchdown. For St. Mary, it was the ground game. Cameron Smith led the way, 151 rushing yards. That was good enough for 3rd in last week's total. I talked about going into the hundreds of games. How about this one? Montana Tech at Carroll. We've made it to the point of the show where Henchman 21 needs to be listening. 124th meeting, and that's, I'm going to say that unofficially. I believe that's right. 124th meeting. Carroll owns an 82-39-2 all-time record over Montana Tech in this one. So the Orediggers trying to pick up win number 40 in the series. And Montana Tech won 30-22 over Carroll last year to open the season, won 42-14 over Carroll last year to close the season. 2 of the Carroll Saints losses last year were to Montana Tech, and you have to say, yeah, the Diggers pretty much kept Carroll out of the playoffs last year. Montana Tech looked to Wykeese Johnson, 3rd on the depth chart coming into last week's game, and he picked up 167 rushing yards, tops in the NAIA for week 1. It could be Jarrett Wilson. It could be Chake Casagranda to start at quarterback. That's what it looked like on the depth chart last week. Wilson got the start, but Casagranda got many of the reps as well, and Montana Tech came away with a big-time win over Montana Western. For Carroll, it was Caden Hewitt getting the week 1 start. The D1 transfer for Montana looks to get the start again. 21 of 33 passing, 256 yards through the air, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. He also carried the ball 16 times for 35 yards and had 1 rushing touchdown too. Gunnar Julio, He was the big defensive player for Carroll last week as Carroll picked up the 20-0 victory, shutting out MSU Northern. Julio with 4 tackles, 1 fumble recovery, 1 interception. I like this when he was quoted after the game on the website. Good things happen when you've got guys running toward the football. Coach P talks about that all the time. Of course, Coach Troy Purcell talking about that. Good things happen when you've got guys running toward the football, and he had a couple of turnovers that he was responsible for getting the ball for Carroll last week. This is a big-time matchup in the Frontier Conference. It's not a divisional game, and so, even though both these teams have wins, one of the other is going to pick up a loss. I don't think it diminishes their playoff hopes at this point in the season, but it's still a big-time matchup between the two. Let's move over to the Heart, and we talk about William Penn. After winning the first game of the season, the Statesmen are going to go on the road to take on Central Methodist in Fayette. 19th meeting between the two, and it's been pretty even. William Penn owns a 9-8-1 all-time record. Won last year, 35-17. Sterling Ramsey, the senior for the Statesmen, earned the start. He played for 1 series and suffered an injury in the contest. Christian Benning, a freshman, came in and took over for him the rest of the way in William Penn's victory last week. Destin Loring had the big day for the Statesmen too. 125 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and that is tied for 3rd in the NAIA. For Central Methodist, the loss last week to Division II Missouri S&T. Zion Slade had the big day for the Eagles, if you will. 3 catches, 90 yards, 1 receiving touchdown for Slade, and we're going to see what the Eagles can do at home, again, taking on William Penn this week. Back to the KCAC, and here's the team that put up the most points so far of the year, definitely of last week. Friends, the Falcons, put 73 on the board against Bethany last week. Avila at home going to try to stop that ground game from the Falcons, and good luck because it has not been easy to do in recent years. 8th meeting between the two, Avila owns a 5-2 all-time record. Friends has won the last 2, though. Won 56-10 in 2024 and 54-20 in 2023. So you have to think, they're on pace for another 50-point game if they put up 73 last week. We'll see if the Eagles can stop them on defense. 695 yards of total offense. That's a school record in the modern era. 73 points. That's a school record in the modern era. And we did do the math on Sunday, and I'll drop this for you again. All speculation. 595 rushing yards is tough to do in any week, much less 11 weeks of a regular season. But if the Falcons did that, they'd be looking at 6,545 rushing yards for the season. I know that's unlikely, but why not speculate? I mean, it was just week 1 after all. Cavante Baker with 129 rushing yards in the season opening win, which, by the way, was the 4th consecutive season opening win for the Falcons, all of them coming under Coach Terry Harrison. And I will say again, the Terry Harrison factor, it's a real thing. Shamar Scruggs for Avila, really one of the bright points last week. He had 16 tackles for the Eagles, and Coach Alexander in Avila's loss last week, 1 half tackle for loss as well. Back to the GPAC. Dakota Wesleyan. How about Dakota Wesleyan picking up the big-time win and taking home the Chamber of Commerce Traveling Trophy back to Mitchell? Some have said back where it belongs. I am just telling you, I heard that, and I think it was from a source in Mitchell. So it didn't come from here at Midwest Sports Net. I'm just saying I overheard that. So the folks there in Madison, please don't be upset at me. We'll talk about Dakota State a little bit later on. 16-14 the win last week for Dakota Wesleyan over Dakota State. Dordt, that's where Dakota Wesleyan will be playing this week. And for Dordt, it's going to be the season opener. 18th meeting between the two. Dakota Wesleyan owns a 10-7 record all time between the two, but Dordt won last year 42-7. Dakota Wesleyan won the first 10. Here's a dichotomy, by the way. Dakota Wesleyan won the first 10 in this series. The next 7, Dordt has won, on pace to try to get a season opening win here. 18th meeting between the two. For Dakota Wesleyan last week, Joseph Van Overshield had 15 tackles, and it was a solid defensive performance. And you have to say Dakota Wesleyan putting up 16 points on the board. They want a higher output than that. For Dordt, The Defenders, it's been strong defense and maybe not as much offense in the last couple of years. We don't know yet who the starting quarterback will be for Dordt. Could be Colton Cruz, the senior from Gallery, Iowa, or could be Noah Strickladen, sophomore from Minnesota. One of those two. They were in the lead in the competition earlier this year, and we'll see who came out of that on top. If Vegas were putting a line on this game, on the over-under, you'd have to think it couldn't be high. And I think if you're going to get any kind of action at all on this, over-under, I would say right now, would be 34.5. So I know I'm sure some of you all are going to take the over on that one, especially if you're Tigers fans or Defenders fans right there. It could be a defensive contest. We'll see how it plays out. But it's going to be the season opener for Coach Penner and the Defenders. That is on Saturday, Dordt hosting Dakota Wesleyan. Another GPAC game. We have a couple more here. Midland lost in the season opener. Hastings won in the season opener. Now, granted, Midland took on a Division II opponent up in North Dakota at U-Mary. Hastings took on a fellow GPAC opponent in Doane last week. So we'll see how that all plays out. 84th meeting between the two. Hastings owns a 48-32 and 3 record all time. Midland won last year 26-7, and Midland has won 8 of the last 9 contests between these two, having lost only in 2023. So recent history, even though Hastings owns a big gap in the record, recent history says Midland has something to do in this game and something to say. Midland with Brody Johnson, the junior from North Bend, Nebraska, 10 of 15 last week for 145 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Hastings had Caden Merriman to lead the way on the ground, 109 rushing yards, and a pair of 100-yard backs as Dalton Armbruster, picked up 103 rushing yards. I've got one more game to mention, take a short break in the contest because I get ahead of myself in this. There's so many games, and I want to get them in, and I think I go a little bit too fast. So sorry about that. Morningside, I want to get to that because I know that's who Jeff and Dave are cheering for, and I want to ask, gentlemen, this one, even though it's going to be on the road, quote unquote, it's going to be in Sioux City. So Jeff and Dave, are you going to the game on Saturday? It's the battle for the saddle. And so far, the saddle has been owned entirely by Morningside. Morningside at Briar Cliff. The Mustangs with a loss last week, 0-1 now on the season. Briar Cliff with a win last week and a solid win on top of that. They're 1-0 on the season. 23rd meeting between these two schools. The record as of now is Morningside 22, Briar Cliff 0. Morningside has won all 22 previous meetings between these two universities in Sioux City, Iowa. It's the battle for the saddle. At some point in time, you think that the law of averages would have to kick in, and Briar Cliff is going to erase that 0. Will it be this year? If it is, Brock Sy is going to have something to say about that. 21 of 25 passing last week, 307 passing yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also had a rushing touchdown, and Brock Sy was named the GPAC Offensive Player of the Week for his effort in the win last week. For Morningside, Zach Chevalier threw for more yards, 356 passing yards. That was good enough to be 3rd highest in the NAIA last week. And Drew Sellen, his favorite receiver, had 124 receiving yards. That's 10th in the NAIA right now in that category, but he picked up a couple of receiving touchdowns this year. So, Dave, let's see. Dave's going to be there. I would imagine so. Dave's going to be there to see Drew, among other people, in that one. And cooking 70 pounds of pork in the tailgate. Wow. I mean, you come prepared. Oh, my goodness. Okay, Dave, I'm telling you, there will be a trip to Sioux City someday, and it's going to have to be sooner than later, it appears. But Dave also says regarding Briar Cliff winning the Battle of the Saddle, not this year. So we'll see how that plays out. And again, this one should be a better matchup than what you might think it would be if you just look at the fact that, again, Morningside 22, Briar Cliff 0. in all-time meetings. I think this could be a contest. Morningside wanting to pick up that first victory of the year, and they'll do it. And I imagine the Morningside faithful can travel across town to be a part of this game as well. So that is going to be this Saturday. We take a breather for just a moment, and let me say thank you again for stopping by Midwest Sports Net and watching college football this week here on the channel. We have a lot of small college sports coverage right here, and we have some goals, by the way, for the calendar year 2025 that we want to end this last third of the year, and we want it to be strong. So I want to encourage you. There's a lot that we'd like to do. And among those things, the way you can help is if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do that. It's free. By the way, you can join and become a member of the channel and support it that way too. But subscription is always free, and it's that's one of those goals. We have some goals for what we want to see for subscribers for the end of this year, and I encourage you to take the time, subscribe to the channel, and just be a part of the community. We are going to be in Durant. Oh, actually, we're going to be in two places in the state of Oklahoma, which I know is the state in which I live, but two places this week for Midwest Sports Saturday. We have two Midwest Sports Saturdays this week, only the third time we've ever done that, and it's the first time it's a Thursday-Saturday combination. We'll be at Division II, Southeastern Oklahoma State University, hosting Arkansas Monticello on Thursday night, as that's the opening of the Great American Conference schedule for Southeastern, and all of the GAC teams will be there for that. That is 4 o'clock start time for that broadcast. And then on Saturday, we step outside football with Midwest Sports Saturday, although we're going to talk football on Saturday. Don't think for a moment we won't. But we're going to be at the volleyball match at Oklahoma City University, as Texas Wesleyan and Oklahoma City University will be playing that day. It's going to be a Sooner Athletic Conference matchup between the two, and it should be a lot of fun. If you like volleyball, these are two of the Tier 1 teams in the Sooner Athletic Conference, so you need to come out and be a part of that, or at least, don't come out for that one if you're living somewhere else and watch. Dave Kent, he's got to be in Sioux City for his game, but definitely tune us in. It will be either an 11 or an 11:30 start time for Midwest Sports Saturday, and we'll be talking volleyball, but you know what? We're going to be talking football and a lot more on that day, so that's what's there. Always invite you to subscribe to the channel. And hey, listen, here's one other thing too before we get back into the slate. Tell a friend. We enjoy talking about small college sports and more throughout the Midwest and beyond. And I'm sure that if your friend has a small college team that he or she likes, that we probably either have talked about that team or will talk about that team almost a definite. So keep that in mind. Just tell a friend and we'll grow the channel. We can do that together. That's part of what this community does. We grow together. So, all right, let's move on. Let's go back to the Frontier Conference here. Get a drink of water from the notoriously graphic-free Black Cup. It actually does have a graphic on the other side. I just haven't shown that to you all yet. So that's where we have there. College of Idaho got the win last week. And it was a solid win last week over Eastern Oregon. Came from behind, down 17-7 at the half. Rocky Mountain with the season opener. These two teams are now playing for the 12th time. College of Idaho with a 7-4 lead all time in this series and won 49-31 last year. The Yotes have won 3 straight in the series. College of Idaho, again, with the win over Eastern Oregon last week. The Yotes started Caden Young. No surprise there. Coach Morosky said that was likely going to happen this summer, and it did. He was 17 for 22 passing, 210 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns. Had 9 carries for 80 yards and a touchdown on the ground as well. For Rocky Mountain, they bring back Mason Browning and Cade Reynolds at linebacker, and the starting quarterback for the Battling Bears this year is going to be Trent Novak, the redshirt sophomore from Arlington, Washington. Now, he started the final game of the season as a true freshman back in 2022, and then started the first 2 games of the season for the Battling Bears in 2023 before he suffered an injury, out for the remainder of that year, didn't play in 2024. He's back in 2025, and he has earned back that starting job at Rocky Mountain. And I have to tell you, by the way, if you check out the website, you want to see Trent Novak there, has the long blonde hair. I need to bring out a picture one of these times, but there was long blonde hair when I was his age. About that color, styled a little bit differently in the 80s, but it just reminded me. So I wanted to bring that out there as well. Trent Novak named the starter for Rocky Mountain as they host College of Idaho on Saturday. Mayville State How about the Comets? How about those Comets? My goodness. A big win last week over Judson, put up 49 points on the board. Seven different players had a rushing touchdown. It's a triple option look now for Mayville State as Coach Larson has brought that in. And they're taking on Division III Concordia from Minnesota. The season opener for Concordia from Minnesota, second time all time that these two teams have met. Concordia owns the last victory between the two, and it happened 87 years ago. In 1938, Concordia won 27-0 over Mayville State. And I'm telling you right now, they may need all 87 of those years to prepare for this offense at Mayville State right now. We've seen what Friends can do with it, and now we've seen Mayville State put up 492 rushing yards in the season opener. And spoke with Coach Larson this week, and he talked about switching to the triple option in the offseason. He said, I was pleased with how it looked for the first time running it in a game-like system. Our kids have bought into the new system, and we're going to continue to work to improve it every single week. So if they improve over 492 rushing yards, I mean, boy, this ceiling has to be pretty high. Well, they're taking on a D3 opponent next week. Peyton McGregor led the way for the Comets, had 152 rushing yards last week. That was good enough for the second highest total in the NAIA last week. Well, across the country, let's go down to the Sunshine State for the second meeting between Florida Memorial, who lost last week, taking on Clark Atlanta, a Division II program from, as you might imagine, Atlanta. It's the Sunshine Showdown. This one was played in 2024, and it was played to a tie. So these two teams, this will be just the second meeting between the two, and neither one of them has a victory in this series. Played to a tie last year, rain, weather, was suspended at the half. 28-28. They both put a lot of points on the board before intermission, but that's where they stopped it. So round two, as it's being billed, is this weekend. Florida Memorial last week lost to Reinhardt 49-35, put points on the board. Clark Atlanta, I said it was their season opener. They're actually 0-1. They lost to Valdosta last week, and Valdosta State is a perennial power in Division II. If you know anything about the Blazers, you know they're going to be tough. And for Clark Atlanta to play them to a 31-28 game, this one has all the makings of a great matchup. Nigel Osborne, 10 carries for 103 yards for Florida Memorial last week, 2 rushing touchdowns. And David Buggs started as the quarterback, 16 for 34. He had 212 passing yards, a pair of touchdowns, and threw an interception as well. For Clark Atlanta, they bring out Zy McDonald, who last week had 234 passing yards and a couple of passing touchdowns. Back across the country again, we're just zigzagging all over the map right now, and we go back to the Frontier Conference where MSU Northern, who was shut out last week, goes on the road this week to take on Montana Western, who also picked up an L last week. So each team looking for their first win of 2025. It's the 57th meeting all-time between the two. Montana Western owning a 40-16 lead all-time in the series. Won 56-14 last year, and it wasn't the only time they've won. The Bulldogs have taken out the lights in this series 16 straight times. So this one has all the makings of the Bulldogs holding serve in their own backyard. But MSU Northern brings out Division I transfer in Roman Bradley, had 16 carries for 60 yards last week. Is it enough against Montana Western's defense? And the offense for Montana Western, Palandri looked good at times last week. Eli Norse with 188 receiving yards last week. That's second in the NAI, and that was in a loss, no less. So Norse looking good, Palandri looking good. We'll see if the Northern defense can put a stop to what the Bulldogs would like to do there in Dillon. Both teams, again, looking for their first victory of the season. Georgetown does have a win in 2025, and the Tigers go on the road to Rio Grande. Second meeting all time between the two. Now, but wait, Joey, this is the first season for Rio Grande. Well, they're bringing football back. It went dormant since 1950, and this stat, as Sesame Street would say, is brought to you by the number 39. That's right, the number 39. Georgetown owns a 1-0 lead in this series, winning 39-0 over Rio Grande in 1939, 86 years ago. Wow. Georgetown beat Pikeville last week doubled up on the Bears 34-17. Rio Grande lost to Defiance 48-6. For Georgetown, Clayton Davis led the way, had 174 receiving yards. That's good enough for fourth in the NAIA right now. A couple of receiving touchdowns. And Garrick Slunaker did Garrick Slunaker things. Passed 15 of 27. Admirable. Better than 50% pass completion there. 225 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. He simply took care of business. He's a great leader for the Tigers, and he just continues to win. Just look him up. All he does is win. Aiden Ludolph got the start for Rio Grande last week, the freshman from Martinsbury, Ohio. So he went across the state to get his first start. This is a roster, by the way, that's made up almost, and I mean almost exclusively of freshmen and sophomores that the coaching staff has brought in. Now Coach Thurston, the head coach. One player of note from last week as well, Mylan Murray had 16 tackles in the loss for Rio Grande. And I'm sure Coach Thurston's hoping that he doesn't have to have 16 tackles this week as they take on Georgetown, and they're hosting the Tigers there. William Woods, the Owls are 0-1 in the season, having lost in Billy Bowl Part 2, taking on Graceland in the Yellow Jackets season opener. It's going to be the first meeting between these two schools, and it was a 52-23 loss last week for William Woods against William Penn. William Woods has lost 8 straight now, 1-11 all time since starting the program last season. Clayton Byer, the Mountain Marty transfer, looking to start at quarterback again this week. For Graceland, there was a note on the school or the program website, the athletic website this summer, announcing a leadership transition on July 31st. So Coach Stayback was announced as the new head coach almost in August as Coach Ross steps into a different position with the program. Coach Stayback, no stranger to the program, an alum with the program, and he had played with Coach Ross before. He's been there for a while. He stays on as the leader, and he has announced his starting quarterback to be C.J. Brooks, a transfer from Bethune-Cookman. He's set to start at quarterback, and all he has at his disposal is Gerald Monroe. Okay, well, there are 9 other players besides Brooks and Monroe, but still, if you have Gerald Monroe at your disposal, last year in just 10 games. He played 10 of the 11. 84 receptions, 1,562 receiving yards, 156.2 yards per game, 22 touchdowns. Those 3 stats, all of them at the top of the NAIA last year. So Graceland hosting William Woods, trying to get a win in the season opener. Clark at Missouri Valley. We stay with the Heart, 5th meeting between these two programs. Missouri Valley 3-1, the all-time lead, and having won 37-13 in 2024. Clark won the only game in this series, 31-30. That was back in 2022. For the Pride, Carlos Estrada, sophomore from 29 Palms, California, and also a transfer from Tabor, went 18 for 35 last week. 238 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 1 pick for Missouri Valley. I checked with the folks there, and Coach Black, in his opening game as the head coach, he's holding his starter at quarterback close to the vest. So no announcement on that one yet from Missouri Valley. The Valley will roll, and wanting to roll into week 1 with a new quarterback under a new head coach in LaQuinton Black. To the Frontier Conference, sort of. We have one team from the Frontier in this one, but taking on an in-state rival on the Division II level. Southern Oregon with a win last week. Western Oregon playing in its season opener. 72nd meeting between these two programs. Western with a 46-25 all-time lead. And the last time these two teams played was in 2010. Western Oregon won 24-23. And actually, from that point, that was the 9th straight win for Western Oregon in the series. So coming in on a 9-game winning streak in the series, even though it's been 15 years, something to that. Southern Oregon is Western Oregon's most often played opponent. Last week, Southern Oregon came off a 59-0 shutout of the Simpson Redhawks in a non-conference matchup between the two in the season opener. They announced Dom Montiel as the starter. last week, and Coach Brown got 346 passing yards out of him, 4th in the NAIA in week 1. He also had 4 passing touchdowns, and that's tied at the top of the leaderboard in that category. He found Brandon Barthel for 182 yards and 3 of those touchdowns that he threw. And those 182 receiving yards, good enough for 3rd in the NAIA. Western Oregon was picked 5th in the Lone Star Conference preseason poll. And if you know anything about Division II, the Lone Star Conference means Texas football. We'll talk a little bit more about Texas football in just a moment, but it does mean something to being able to play those opponents, and Western Oregon picked 5th there in the conference. We'll see how this one plays out. I think Southern Oregon is primed to put a stop to the Western Oregon winning streak in the series. Again, we'll see you on Saturday. St. Xavier on the road at Indiana Wesleyan. 3rd meeting between the two. IWU has won each of the previous 2 meetings, 39-7 last year and 16-15 back in 2023. However, the Wildcats lost in their season opener to Kaiser, 38-31 last week for Indiana Wesleyan. Don't know who the starter will be for St. Xavier, but for Indiana Wesleyan, Braxton Myers had a big outing, 5 catches for 133 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown from Arjun Lothi last week. And Vinci Solano had 9 tackles on defense, one of them a tackle for loss, and had an interception as well. Shout out to Josh Stapp, friend of the channel and a personal friend as well. So thanks for watching tonight from Denison, Josh. No shock that you're watching there. We've already talked about some Yellow Jackets. Not going to talk about your Yellow Jackets tonight, but I'm sure we'll mention them at some point in time. We are talking Texas football a little bit later on. Warner, the Royals, have the season opener and taking on a team from Division I that we talked about last week. It's Warner at Stetson, D1 Stetson. And Weber International shut down the Hatters last week, 31-21. This is the 6th meeting between Stetson and Warner. Of course, schools have some proximity. 5-0. That's the Stetson lead all time in this series. And the Hatters won 35-0 in 2024. Now, Warner is going to start Jeremiah Johnson at quarterback. This is put out today. Grad student in his 2nd season at Warner after spending some time in a fellow Polk County university as he comes over from Southeastern, to be at the program at Warner. Saw a little time for Coach Burks in 2024 as well. Stetson going to start either Gavin Rupp or Cale Alexander, a redshirt freshman at quarterback. We'll see how that one plays out. Stetson getting the loss last week. And you would imagine that Coach Jasper's team would be ready for another NAI program this week. That one had to be a tough one. And so Warner looking to get a good start from Johnson. We'll see how they fare on the road at Stetson this week. To the GPAC. I'm not used to saying GPAC when I say Waldorf. I'm still getting used to that. I know the Warriors have been there for a little while, but Mount Marty with a season opening victory. Waldorf with a loss to open 2025. 2nd meeting between the two. Mount Marty won 56-7 last year. Mount Marty beat Clark to open the season. Waldorf lost to Northwestern, shut out by the Red Raiders. For Mount Marty, Rugby Riken, the 2-sport star, 4 touchdown passes. That leads the NAI in that category. And Malachi Hartz with 148 rushing yards last week for the Lancers. That's 4th in the NAI there. For Waldorf, shut out last week. So the question is, who's going to step up there for the Warriors? And we'll see if anyone does this week at home in Forest City. Marion, season opening loss last week to Division II U Indy and a very good Indianapolis program in the monumental matchup, taking on Lawrence Tech on the road, traveling to Michigan for this one. 6th meeting between the two. Marion has won all 5 of the previous matchups between these two, including a show-stopping 24-23 victory in 24 last year. So Marion winning by a point last season. This one is going to be in Lawrence Tech. Tristan Polk, the quarterback for the Knights last week, 14 of 26 passing for 221 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. We are still waiting for an announcement on who Lawrence Tech is going to start at quarterback. Let's move on over another non-conference matchup here on the eastern half of the state. Bluefield, the Rams get the win last week, beating Thomas 31-20, taking on Cumberland's. And Cumberland's also with a victory. We mentioned that. They beat Union Commonwealth 25-11. So Bluefield at Cumberland's the 8th meeting all time between these two. And Cumberland's owns a 6-1 lead in this series, having won 31-9 last year. Bluefield started Ethan Cash at quarterback, 10 for 17, 128 passing yards in his debut, taking over that spot from Nathan Hurstich, who, by the way, is still with the program. He's coaching the quarterbacks now. So he went straight from playing on the field to coaching with Coach Dewey Lusk there for the Rams. And Cash had a solid outing in his debut. Another Ethan for Bluefield, Ethan Walker, the Appalachian Defensive Player of the Week. How about this? 6 tackles, and of those 6 tackles, 3 of them tackles for loss. That includes a sack too. So Ethan Cash, Ethan Walker leading the way for the Rams. For Cumberland's, Drew Gregg definitely leading the way in that big win over the Bulldogs last week. 342 passing yards, had 4 passing touchdowns, and that's tied at the top of that category as well. So this one should be a good matchup at Cumberland's. Lindsey Wilson with the big victory over Texas Wesleyan and just stopping the Rams, shutting down the Rams last week at Ave Maria for the Gyrenes' first game of the new season. Second meeting all time between these two programs. Lindsey Wilson won 44-15 in 2018. Pryor Lamb for the Blue Raiders last week, 4 passing touchdowns. That's at the top of that category, tied with 3 other quarterbacks, but still, you get 4 passing touchdowns against Texas Wesleyan's defense. That's pretty solid. Kaya Sherrard, 215 yards on the ground. That is at the top of the NAIA. The only player in week 1 to top the 200-yard mark in rushing yards, Kaya Sherrard right there. For Ave Maria, Coach Patterson, who's been the head coach for quite a while, he was also the AD for about 5 years at Ave Maria. He stepped out of that role, but he's stepping into a dual role again as he'll be the offensive coordinator for Ave Maria in 2025. So we'll see what plays he draws up. He's going to have to do it against a tough Blue Raiders defense that, again, really held its own against Texas Wesleyan last week. And Reinhardt at Cumberland. 6th meeting between these two. The Eagles own a 4-1 lead all time in the series. Won 44-27 the last time this matchup was decided on the field. There's a forfeit in there somewhere. 44-27 back in 2016. Reinhardt defeated Florida Memorial by 14 last week. And Taylor Jackson was the Appalachian Offensive Player of the Week. 15 for 24 passing, 247 passing yards, and 3 passing touchdowns. For Cumberland, just 94 yards of total offense, 40 passing, 54 rushing last week. They're going to have to find a way to make a change. Zach Holzclaw started at quarterback. He was 6 for 15 passing for just 34 passing yards. So they're going to have to make that adjustment there, trying to get the season opening win at home this Saturday. We're going to take just another breather here, get some more water, and take the time long enough for me to say, thank you for being a part of the community. It is a fun community, and I have enjoyed watching the growth of this channel, but really all of its growth is because of you, and I'm very thankful for you. And like I said at the outset, you're awesome. God made you well, and don't ever think any less than that. God made you well, and I think you're pretty awesome too. So I encourage you, take the time to subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, please do that now. We're growing the channel. We have some goals, and we enjoy being a part of the community. Don't forget, we are going to be on site at Durant on Thursday and on site at Oklahoma City on Saturday. And then we're heading across the river to Waxahachie on September 13th. That's right. We'll be down there for the Nelson Lions football game and volleyball matches too. It's going to be a big day on Saturday, September 13th. So be sure to tune in for that. All right. We had 15 games to get started, another 15 games. Let's talk about 15 more games. Why not? It is a fun Tuesday night here, and we're going to go back to the Thursday night weekly preview show. But since we were going to be doing Midwest Sports Saturday on a Thursday, we had to push this one up in the week, so that's where we are right now. Culver Stockton won its season opener against Texas College and shut out the Steers 40-0. Mid-America Nazarene won its season opener as well, and they're going to be playing at the ODAC again this week, hosting Culver Stockton in a heart matchup, crossover divisional matchup there. 46 meeting between the two. The Pioneers own a 32 I need to slow down. The Pioneers own a 33-12 all-time lead in the series. And Mid-American Nazarene got the victory over Nelson. We just mentioned the Lions right there, 37-13 last week. It was the first season opening win for Culver Stockton since 2020 and the first shutout for the Wildcats since 2018. Taj Washington was one of two players with 2 rushing touchdowns, and he was 16 carries for 54 rushing yards on the day. For Mid-American Nazarene, Samuel Gonzalez led the way with 155 receiving yards. That's 7th in the NAIA. Oh, and Ion Carter had a receiving touchdown too. Gonzalez had a couple. Carter had one, and Carter had a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown in that one. So the Wildcats and the Pioneers in Olathe this week. Back to the KCAC. Sterling at Evangel. The Warriors lost last week against Tabor 34-9. The Valor with another KCAC victory, and they just continue to roll since being a part of that conference, beating St. Mary 62-14. This will be the third all-time meeting between Sterling and Evangel. 38-14 was the victory for the Valor in 2024, and 55-0. The Valor shut out the Warriors in 2023. So Sterling trying to get into the win column in this series and into the win column for 2025. Rockland Baptista, 12 of 23 passing for 151 yards last week with 1 passing touchdown. And he found Ryan Stuckey, 3 catches for 90 yards, one of them, of course, for a touchdown. For Evangel, Reed Potts, starting off the year well, once again, 4 touchdown passes. And Eric Williams, their 1,000-yard back from last season, the senior from Irving, Texas, 18 carries for 133 yards. Yeah, he's on pace for 1,000-plus yards again, at least through week 1. Had a touchdown. Oh, and he also had 3 catches for 84 yards and 2 touchdown receptions. So Williams leading the way for the Valor. They take on Sterling in Springfield. Actually, it'll be in Nixa, but close enough. Baker at Peru State. Heart matchup right there. The Wildcats. It's the season opener, and they're going to go on the road at Peru State here. 17th meeting between the two. Baker 13-3, the all-time series lead. 36-17, they won over Peru State in the season opener back in 2023. I had a chance to visit with Coach Regalado, actually get to stop by and say hi to him on the way back from Olathe last week, and it was a true privilege. Thoroughly enjoy visiting with Coach Regalado, and he just always has a lot of wisdom to bring to the table, and it was nice to get to meet him face-to-face. Truman Julesgard will lead the way once again for the Wildcats. A fantastic season last year. We'll see how he gets things started this year against a Peru State team that, for the most part, I mean, you look at what the defense did, holding Oklahoma Panhandle State to just 10 points, solid, but the Bobcats' own offense was held in check, kept out of the end zone, held to just 3 field goals last week. So that's going to be the difference maker right there. Can the Bobcats find a way to get some offensive movement against the Wildcats defense while they do this at home? Chase Campbell was 7 for 15 passing for Peru State. Kansas Wesleyan on the road at Bethany at Lindsborg. 94th meeting. Bethany owns a tight lead here, 46-42, all time with 5 ties. And how about this? We get a shout out for Baker here. So Baker going on the road. They're in Hart Conference play, but let's back to the KCAC really quickly. And Herm, thanks for chiming in there. Luke Armstrong for Kansas Wesleyan had 146 rushing yards last week. Diego Davis, the sophomore, who also came to Kansas Wesleyan from Harding, as did Coach Matt Middleton, who, by the way, won his debut. Harding transfer had 2.5 sacks last week, too, for the Coyotes. So a big day for him. For Bethany, it looks like Landry Shields will be starting again. Kansas Wesleyan won 54-16 in 2024, and the Coyotes have won 10 straight in this series, trying to make it 11 on Saturday. Bethel, the Tennessee version of Bethel. We'll talk about Bethel in back-to-back previews here. How about this one? The Wildcats on the road. They're going to Texas to take on Mary Hardin Baylor, the season opener for both these two teams. And it's the second meeting all time. Mary Hardin Baylor won 20-10 in 2024. Now, this game has D3 written all over it for a number of reasons. Number one, Mary Hardin-Baylor is a Division III school, and it's a Texas football school, and they play pretty good football in the state of Texas. If you know anything about Texas football, and I know Josh, if he's still watching, absolutely does. Well, this Mary Hardin-Baylor team made it to the Division III quarterfinals last year, and pretty far along in all of that. Well, they're taking on a Bethel team at home. Sorry, there's that itch. It just doesn't want to go away. They're taking on a Bethel team who's going to be starting Destin Chance on Saturday. Now, Chance is a grad transfer from Illinois College, and all he did was become a finalist for the Gallardi Trophy, which, by the way, if you're familiar again with Division III, it is the Division III answer to Division I's Heisman Trophy and Division II's Harlan Hill Award. So Chance, a finalist for the Gallardi Trophy, hung around since pretty much pre-COVID and was actually listed earlier on as a wide receiver. In 2024, however, for Illinois College, he had 3,593 passing yards, 50 passing touchdowns, and 8 rushing touchdowns. And he did it in 10 games. That was all in the regular season. Accounted for 58 touchdowns last year, passing for nearly 3,600 yards. This is a name that you need to go ahead and mark down right now. This could be a big deal for Coach Springer in his debut season as the head coach for Bethel. You have to think the defense is in good hands anyway, and this could put that offense back in very good hands, and this could be a team, then the Wildcats could make some noise in the Mid-South. We'll find out, but again, remember that name, Destin Chance. He will be the starter for the Bethel Wildcats in their season opener in week 2. Josh, still here. Appreciate that. You know, we talk about some Texas football around here every now and again, so just something to drop. All right. How about the other Bethel? The Bethel from North Newton, Kansas. Well, they're going to be playing this game in North Newton this week, and they invite McPherson to town. 93rd meeting between McPherson and Bethel. The Threshers lead all time in the series 52-40. McPherson won 35-10 last year. Last week, McPherson beat Avila in the season opener 52-7. Bethel lost to Southwestern 61-7. As McPherson brings out Ryan Markarian to step in, as we have become familiar with Tristan Zabo in that spot. I think we've come to the last week where we're going to mention him. It could be Markarian's team this year, and it looks like it through week 1. 17 for 24 passing, 75% completion rate there, 231 passing yards, 2 touchdowns thrown, no picks for Markarian. And, of course, he has Jalea Brown in the backfield with him, 12 carries for 147 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Had 4 receptions too, but he didn't want to take away from Traven Lewis-Johnson, who had 7 catches, 126 yards last week, one of those for a touchdown. For Bethel, Josiah Buller led the way, had 3 catches for 51 yards and 1 receiving touchdown. It was a tough outing for Bethel against Southwestern last week, so they're going to try to change their fortune hosting McPherson this week. Point taking on LaGrange as they host a Division III opponent there on the Alabama-Georgia line. First meeting between the two. Point lost to Faulkner last week, 28-8. Eli Moore was the starting QB, 14 of 22 passing, 140 passing yards, a touchdown and a pick. And Cortez Thomas had 6 tackles for loss. Now, he did it in a losing effort, but still, 6 tackles for loss. That's a big deal there. So Point hosting LaGrange this week, trying to pick up its first win of the season. Madonna at Olivet Nazarene. Now, we've talked about Madonna a few times here on the channel in the preseason. Third meeting between these two schools. Olivet Nazarene has won them both in the past, 42-15 in 24, 55-0 in the season opener in 2023. Last week, Olivet Nazarene beat Taylor 48-42 in overtime. And we've talked about, again, I believe the Crusaders will win a game or games in 2025. Coach Kaminsky has named defensive end Aaron Brooks and safety Corey Watkins as captains for the team. We'll find out a little bit more about this team as the week goes on. They're going to be going on the road for the season opener to Olivet Nazarene. Christian Dew Reed last week, 19 of 29 passing for 322 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, threw a pick as well, had 1 rushing touchdown too. He had the last 2 games in 2024 in which he was able to start for Olivet Nazarene, and it looks like Coach Mitchell has found his starter for 2025. So Madonna on the road at Olivet Nazarene in this one. All right, Nebraska Wesleyan, D3, the Prairie Wolves are heading north to take on Dakota State. Dakota State looking for its first win of the season. The Trojans and the Prairie Wolves playing for only the second time. Dakota State won 41-25 last year, but Dakota State lost to Dakota Wesleyan last week, 16-14. A field goal attempt in the closing seconds, and it was really close range, and it was on the hash, and that's a tough angle. Dakota State, by the way, has Rayshawn Eaton, the sophomore from Spokane Valley, Washington, and the transfer from Lincoln University, D2 right there, in at starting quarterback. 8 for 16 last week for 168 yards passing and threw one touchdown, a couple of picks as well. Had 18 carries for 75 yards and one rushing touchdown. Now, we talked about Trey Heddick being the starter over the course of the summer, but Heddick still not yet cleared to play, and so Rayshawn Eaton has earned that starting job, and he will be there this week as well as the Trojans are going to host Nebraska Wesleyan. By the way, the Trojans also with a couple of defensive team records. They held Dakota Wesleyan, even though it was a loss, to just 64 yards of total offense and negative 2 yards rushing to be specific there. So those two both records for the defense, not a bad outing. Shout out to Kai Law, who gives the Go Blue Raiders there, Lindsey Wilson, and also the Go Buffaloes too, Arkansas Baptist. We're going to mention Arkansas Baptist a little bit later on. Lindsey Wilson we'll talk about a little bit more next week, although the Blue Raiders did make their way into the media poll this week. St. Ambrose, the Fighting Bees, looking for the first win of the season, trying to do it in St. Louis at Missouri Baptist. 9th meeting between these two. St. Ambrose 6-2 all time. Missouri Baptist won the last time these two teams played. That was 42-38 in 2022. St. Ambrose lost to Briar Cliff last week. And again, Alec Ponder, the redshirt sophomore who steps in, he earned the starting job. And Coach Phillip talked about that this summer, and it is going to be Ponder. 19 for 27 passing, 240 passing yards. I mean, he had a 70+% completion rating on the day, or completion percentage on the day, and it was still 10 points less than Brock Saya. And so when a quarterback throws the ball like what Saya did for Briar Cliff, it's going to be a tough outing anyway around. Coach Burienek hasn't yet released his starter for the Spartans season opener. There's some alliteration in there. I don't need to say it again, but he hasn't yet released his starter, so we'll see who's going to start for the Spartans. But again, Missouri Baptist hosting St. Ambrose. And I will say again, I know that there are some teams that are right up there at the top of the heart. Grandview, right up there at the very top. Benedictine, Baker, Mid-American Nazarene. I think Missouri Baptist is poised to be up there among those, and just need to watch out for the Spartans team because it's starting to make some noise in the heart. Doane at Concordia in the GPAC, 70th meeting between these two schools from the state of Nebraska. Doane, 43-23-3 all-time in the series. Concordia won last year 45-10. Last week, Doane lost to Hastings 20-7, but had a couple of 100-yard running backs as well. For Concordia, Gideon Stark set to make the start for the Bulldogs. The 6'7" senior from Magnolia, Texas. And, you know, he's played behind DJ McGarvey for quite a while now, and he's getting his opportunity for Coach Daverco. He's set to lead the way. Another player playing behind stellar offense. Adam Van Cleve comes back in the receiver role, among others, and it's behind a very solid offensive line. So Concordia trying to get a season opening win, and that will be at home in Seward, taking on Doane. Southwestern, back to the KCAC for just a moment, 1-0, taking on a Blue Jays team from Tabor, also 1-0. 55th meeting between these two schools. Southwestern owns a 38-16 all-time lead in the series, won 42-0 last year and has won 7 straight in the series. Last week beat Bethel 61-7. Tabor beat Sterling 34-9. And for Southwestern, Jamie Odom got the start in his first start, and as the Braden Howell days are now a thing of the past. 64 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. and that's tied for third in the NAIA in that column. Ahmad, 15 for 19, 130 passing. I misspelled that name badly. For 130 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. I didn't mess up A.J. King. He had 6 catches for 96 yards, and 3 of his 6 catches were for touchdowns. Texas College on the road at Arkansas Baptist. Both teams suffered tough losses last week. It's the 4th meeting between these two. Arkansas Baptist leads the series 2-1 all time, but Texas College won 49-22 in 2024. And Kai Law would love to give you a little bit more information about these two, and it was challenging to find information from both the athletic departments, and there was a lot of effort put in on this, but we do know they're going to play each other next week, and Texas College won last year by 27. Wayland Baptist on the road at OUAZ. The Spirit have won all 7 of the previous meetings between Wayland Baptist and Ottawa of Arizona. Spirit won 42-28 last year. For Wayland Baptist, Coach Inoho said the strength of the offense is in the offensive line, and they have a new offensive coordinator, Christian Escobar, coming in. The starting quarterback is going to be Brian Roeder, a junior from San Antonio, making his first start for Wayland Baptist. That will be on Saturday, and he will take on Luke Giron, who is also officially the starter for the Spirit. No surprise there. We did expect that, but it is official. He's the starting quarterback, and in 2 years, all he's done is this: 5,033 passing yards, 61 touchdowns thrown, 66% completion percentage, 417 rushing yards, and 10 more rushing touchdowns. That's all he's done. And for Coach Riley Murphy, it's a new era now at OUAZ, and we'll see how this one plays out. Wayland Baptist at OUAZ on Saturday. And finally, Division II Fort Lewis goes on the road. Made it to the last one. Goes on the road. All you can do is laugh. And takes on Arizona Christian. I may need a cough drop for this last one. The Firestorm. It's the season opener. 4th meeting between these two schools. Arizona Christian's 2-1 in the series. The Firestorm won in 2022 and 2023, really. Fort Lewis won last year 17-12. Fort Lewis lost to William Jewell last week, another Division II program, 34-14. And we do have word from Arizona Christian. Josh Bell will be the starter in the first game. He's played club ball the last couple of years, and the junior from San Diego is making his first start for Arizona Christian, and this is a solid program with Coach Bowen. So this is a big deal, and I am excited to see how Josh Bell does in his first start. And again, Arizona Christian taking on a Division II program, but they have to make the trip to ACU. And Arizona Christian will be a part of 2 of the longest road trips of the year for NAIA schools this season. So this one could be a big game. Fort Lewis coming in from Colorado to ACU on that one. Again, Josh Bell named the starter in that game. I made it through 44 without a cough drop, and completely the wheels came off with that final game. But I want to give a shout out to all of you. If you're watching this live, thank you for continuing to watch. Listen, Saturday has 45 games on the docket. That's in the NAIA alone. There's a lot more college football out there too. But the college football we're talking about here, NAIA football, 44 on Saturday, 1 on Thursday night. There's so much to watch. There's so many streaming options to watch right now. There's a lot that is out there, and we should have a very, very fun time. You got to hear some of the starting quarterbacks tonight as we broke a little news here on college football this week, and I know there's a lot more on the way. So I want to encourage you, watch football this week. We're, again, going to be Midwest Sports Saturday, Thursday night, 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon from the Arkansas Monticello at Southeastern Oklahoma State game. Saturday, we're going to be on the campus of Oklahoma City University, a volleyball matchup between Texas Wesleyan and Oklahoma City University. We're going to talk volleyball, but we're going to talk football too on that day. And then next week, we're going to be on the road at Waxahachie at Nelson for that football game and some volleyball as well. So it should be a lot of fun. I encourage you, stick with the channel here. again, as we wrap up, we have a lot of goals. And the only way we can do the things we want to do is because you're a part of it. And I'm so glad you're a part of this community. So a shout out to Herm and to Kai Law, to Josh, to Dave, to Jeff, and to, I think that was all in the chat tonight. Yeah. To all of you guys for being a part of it tonight. Thank you so much for being a part of this live broadcast. If you're watching this in the on-demand version and you've made it to the end, you are an absolute trooper, and I appreciate you as well. So subscribe to the channel. Tell a friend to subscribe to the channel. Tell more than one friend to subscribe to the channel, and we appreciate you. So a lot more on the way. There may be a video tomorrow. We'll see, but we'll definitely be on live on Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Midwest Sportsnet is supported by you. And Mrs. Midwest Sportsnet, too. Shout out to her, too, because she lets me do this. All right. You guys have a fantastic evening. Thank you so much again for watching. God bless you all. You are absolutely awesome, and I will see you very soon here on the channel.